WWE just threw away millions of dollars in future main event potential, destroyed what could have been their next decade-defining superstar, and committed the most short-sighted act of creative sabotage I have witnessed in my entire time covering professional wrestling, and I am absolutely seething with rage right now. Bron Breakker, the second-generation machine, the genetic freak who was literally born to be WWE champion, the man who has been demolishing everyone put in front of him for the past year, just got absolutely obliterated, embarrassed, and buried by the Vision in a match so one-sided, so career-damaging, so monumentally stupid from a booking perspective that I genuinely believe someone in WWE's creative department should be fired for approving this catastrophe. This wasn't just a loss, this was a systematic destruction of everything Bron Breakker has built, and by the time this video ends, you're either going to be as furious as I am about WWE wasting their most valuable young asset, or you're going to try to explain to me in the comments how feeding your future to someone who hasn't even been properly established yet is somehow genius booking. Let me set the stage for this absolute disaster, because context matters when we're talking about potentially career-altering booking decisions. Bron Breakker has been on an absolute tear for months, destroying opponents, winning championships, carrying himself like the legitimate badass that his genetics and training have prepared him to be. This is a guy with the Steiner bloodline running through his veins, combining his father Rick's intensity with his uncle Scott's freakish athleticism, creating what should be WWE's next unstoppable monster heel or dominant babyface champion. Every time Bron steps in that ring, he looks like a star. The spears, the power moves, the intensity in his eyes, everything about him screams future WWE champion and next generation legend. And then the Vision happened. Now, let me be clear about something before you accuse me of hating on the Vision. The man is talented. He's got a unique look, he can work in the ring, and his character has potential. But potential is not the same as being ready to completely destroy someone who should be protected and built as WWE's future. The Vision hasn't been built up as an unstoppable force. He hasn't been positioned as someone on Bron's level. He's been in mid-card feuds, had some good matches, but nothing that would justify him going over Bron Breakker, let alone demolishing him in the way we witnessed on Raw. Here's my first question for you, and I want brutally honest answers. Did you think the Vision was ready to beat Bron Breakker before this match happened, or are you as confused as I am about WWE's decision-making? Drop your thoughts below. The match started normally enough, both men in the ring feeling each other out, establishing the pace. For the first maybe 90 seconds, it looked like we might actually get a competitive back-and-forth contest. Bron hit some of his signature power moves, showing off that incredible strength-to-speed ratio that makes him so special. He launched the Vision across the ring with a belly-to-belly suplex that had the crowd popping, because that's the Bron they've come to expect. Dominant, explosive, unstoppable. But then, everything went off the rails. The Vision caught Bron with a counter that shifted the momentum, and from that point forward, it was like watching a veteran systematically dismantle a rookie. Except Bron isn't a rookie. He's been wrestling for years. He's held championships. He's main-evented shows. But in this match, WWE booked him to look completely outclassed, utterly overwhelmed, and thoroughly dominated by someone who, again, hasn't been established as being on that level. The Vision started working Bron over with a combination of strikes and technical wrestling that Bron seemingly had no answer for. Every time Bron tried to mount a comeback, the Vision would shut it down immediately, making Bron's offense look weak and ineffective. Bron would hit a clothesline that would normally flatten someone, but the Vision would barely stagger. Bron would attempt a power move, but the Vision would reverse it and make Bron look foolish for even trying. This wasn't competitive wrestling, this was a squash match disguised as a featured bout. Let me ask you this. When was the last time you saw Bron Breakker look this vulnerable and weak in a match? Because I can't remember a single time, and that should tell you how badly WWE botched this booking. The crowd started getting confused halfway through the match because what they were seeing didn't align with what they'd been conditioned to expect. Bron Breakker is supposed to be the guy who overcomes adversity, who fights from underneath when necessary, but ultimately prevails through sheer power and determination. Instead, they were watching him get picked apart like a mid-card jobber who was just there to make someone else look good. The energy in the arena shifted from excitement to bewilderment, and you could hear it in the crowd reactions, scattered chants that didn't quite know who to support because the storytelling was so contradictory to everything that had been established. The Vision locked in a submission hold at one point, a modified crossface that had Bron's arm trapped while wrenching back on his neck, and Bron was selling it like his career was on the line. The pain on his face looked legitimate, the desperation in his movements suggested he was in real trouble, and for a moment I thought, okay, maybe Bron fights out of this, makes a comeback, and we get a competitive finish. But nope. The Vision just kept the hold locked in, Bron kept struggling, and you could see his movements getting weaker and weaker, like he was actually about to tap out or pass out. The referee was checking on Bron, lifting his arm to see if he was still conscious, and the crowd was silent. Not the good kind of dramatic silence, but the we don't understand what we're watching kind of silence, because Bron Breakker tapping out or passing out to the Vision would be insane from a booking perspective. It would essentially tell the audience that everything they'd been led to believe about Bron's dominance and future potential was a lie. Quick question for the comments. If Bron had tapped out in this match, would you have stopped believing him as a future main eventer? Because I think a lot of people would have, and that's the danger of this kind of booking. Bron eventually made it to the ropes to break the hold, but the damage was done, both literally in the context of the match and figuratively in terms of his credibility. He looked weak. He looked like someone who barely escaped a submission hold, rather than someone who fought out of it through strength and willpower. And the Vision looked like an absolute killer, which would be great if WWE had been building him that way for months, but they haven't. This dominant performance came out of nowhere, with no narrative justification for why the Vision suddenly has the ability to completely neutralize someone as physically gifted as Bron. The finishing sequence of the match was what really made me want to throw something at my television. Bron attempted his signature spear, the move that has finished countless opponents, the move that looks absolutely devastating when he hits it, and the Vision not only countered it, but he countered it in a way that made Bron look completely stupid for attempting it. The Vision sidestepped, caught Bron in a roll-up counter, transitioned into a pinning combination, and then, I kid you not, held Bron down for the 3 count with what looked like relative ease. But it gets worse. After the 3 count, after the match was officially over, the Vision wasn't finished. He attacked Bron post-match, continuing the assault even though he'd already won. He hit Bron with his finishing move, a devastating maneuver that left Bron laid out in the center of the ring, completely motionless, and then the Vision stood over Bron's body, arms raised in victory, while the commentary team tried to convince us that we'd just witnessed a shocking upset and a changing of the guard. Let me be very clear about something. This wasn't a shocking upset. Upsets are when the underdog overcomes the odds through heart, determination, and maybe a little bit of luck. This was a demolition. This was one competitor completely dominating another from start to finish, making them look weak and unprepared. That's not how you book upsets, and it's definitely not how you book someone you want the audience to continue believing in as a future main eventer. Drop a comment. On a scale of 1 to 10, how angry are you about how WWE booked this match? Give me your real number, because I'm at about a 15 right now. The post-match scene was almost painful to watch. Medical personnel had to come out to check on Bron, who was selling the attack like he'd been in a legitimate street fight rather than a worked wrestling match. He needed help getting to his feet. He was holding his ribs and his head, and he limped up the ramp looking thoroughly defeated. Meanwhile, the Vision was celebrating in the ring like he'd just won the WWE Championship, and the crowd didn't know how to react because WWE had given them no reason to care about the the Vision as a top-level competitor before this moment. This is what happens when wrestling companies book for the moment instead of the story. Yes, the Vision beating Bron Breakker is a shocking result that will generate social media discussion and YouTube thumbnails with shocked face emojis. But what about next week? What about next month? What happens when Bron is supposed to be in main event feuds, but the audience remembers that time he got absolutely demolished by the Vision and couldn't even mount a competitive showing? That credibility is hard to rebuild once it's damaged, and WWE just damaged Bron's credibility potentially beyond repair. Let's talk about what this means for Bron's future trajectory, because that's what really has me concerned. Before this match, you could believably book Bron Breakker against anyone on the roster, and the audience would buy him as a legitimate threat. Reigns? Absolutely. Seth Rollins? No problem. Gunther? That would be incredible. Bron had that aura of invincibility that all future main eventers need, the sense that he could beat anyone on any given night if booked properly. But now, there's doubt. The audience has seen him get thoroughly dominated.